Very good morning. On my behalf, my name is Petri Kemppinen. I'm one of the host moderators here, and very, very pleased to be able to hold this session with the Flanders, who is our guest region this year. Last but not least, Pieter Dewinter from Framework and Flanders Tax Shelter is explaining, how the money runs.
I'm so far behind the scenes with our company, I don't even have a clip to show.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm very sorry, there's no sexy way to talk about tax shelter besides showing a bloody PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Most of you know what it is all about, obviously. There we go. I don't know what slides are going to be included. There you go. Maybe very briefly about Flanders Tax Shelter. We're part of a larger group of companies. Very short, an advisory firm for media finance, co-production setup, etc. We have Brightside as a service production company. We have Framework as a platform for product placement and sponsoring, platform that's being developed now. So within that group of companies, Flanders Tax Shelter focuses on what the name says, tax shelter finance, primarily in Flanders. We finance about 100 projects per year. Last year it was about 22 million euro finance on a yearly basis. We have done quite some Nordic co-productions, but only behind the scenes. So it's primarily the co-production partners that work together with the Nordics that we have worked on. 20 million per year, that's a lot. To set the stage a little bit, Tax Shelter in Belgium represents on a yearly basis about 200 million euros of finance. So that's huge, especially for a very small country. That's audiovisual productions as well as stage productions, so theater, musical and opera is also included. But it's an enormous amount of money that is made available. That's also why it's relevant for the Belgian audiovisual sector, but it also facilitates co-productions, obviously. I can do half an hour to an hour presentations about Tax Shelter. It seems for a lot of people to be very complicated. Sometimes very complicated to explain all the little rules, but I'll stick to the most important part. Before explaining what it is, I'll explain what it is not. It's not a regular tax credit. It is not to be compared. I don't know, I hope no one gets an epileptic attack. It's not my fault, I hope, no. Okay. It is not a tax credit, so it's not to be compared to other tax credits existing in Europe. It is not a tax credit because it's an unlimited fund. It's not a lottery either. It is not a very large or complex application process that in the end you may or may not receive the necessary funding. And it's pretty much unconditional, which sets it apart from a lot of other classic tax rebates that require quite some cultural input or have a cap on the finance. In essence, Belgian Tax Shelter is pretty much limitless. It depends on companies as ours or production companies that do it themselves to find the necessary funding, but there's no limit. So that's what makes it very attractive for international producers to come to Belgium. Unconditional, that's not true, obviously. For the people who know Tax Shelter in detail, they know there's quite some rules to follow, but that's especially the case for the Belgian producer. For the international co-producer, it is pretty unconditional. There are two main things to take into account. First of all, it needs to be production that is eligible for Tax Shelter, which is pretty easy for most international co-productions, as long as it's a animation, documentary or fiction, series, television, for streaming or for theater, it is going to be an eligible work. So there's no not a lot of complex rules there. And the second thing, and most important thing, the advantage is based on the qualifying costs you make in the European Economic Area and in Belgium primarily. So if you're an international or an international co-producer, you want to co-produce with Belgium, as soon as you have a project and you can determine what am I going to spend in Belgium, with what Belgian partners am I going to collaborate with, what money am I going to spend, as from that moment you can pretty easily determine the amount of tax shelter that's available. Very briefly, the absolute essence, for every euro of tax shelter that is spent in Belgium, you need for every euro of tax shelter you get in Belgium, you need to spend double that amount. So to make it very concrete, you're a Swedish production company, you come to Belgium, you work with Flow, you spend 200,000 euros with Flow for post-production, you get around 100,000 euros of tax shelter. So that's the very simple main advantage that tax shelter has to offer. What does a Belgian spend? All Belgian crew, cast, suppliers, service suppliers, who invoice to the Belgian production company. So there's no reason or no necessity to make that actual spend in Belgium. You can have a Belgian crew, Belgian technical equipment, and shoot an entire film in Sweden. That's going to be accounted for as Belgian spend. So it doesn't need to take place here. Obviously, the lights, water studio, you can't put it elsewhere. But it's about Belgian crew, Belgian cast, Belgian suppliers that have an invoice to the Belgian production company. That's in essence what it is all about. So that also means that for the 200 million euro per year of tax shelter that is being collected and being invested on a yearly basis, that accounts for a minimum of 400 million euros of Belgian production spend on a yearly basis. And for a tiny country or for a tiny region, that is absolutely huge. So that's also, again, one of the reasons that it is a pretty successful measure. Up to 53, so about half of the Belgian spend is tax shelter. In theory, it's up to 53. It's not 53 in practice. There's quite some extra costs. You have Belgian investors on the other side of the balance who need to be paid, who need to have a return. You have the tax shelter cost, you have an insurance, etc. But at this moment, the current realistic net advantage for a producer is about for a foreign producer is about 35 to 40% of the Belgian spend. So that is pretty much what you can take into account. Sometimes it's a little bit higher, depends on Euribor, etc. So you have quite some flexibility there. But that is what it accounts for at this moment. How to, and as a final slide, you determine your co-production setup. What am I going to spend in Belgium? Why is it relevant? What kind of companies do you want to work with? And you find a good Belgian co-production company. In terms of content-wise, a service producer, doesn't matter. You need a Belgian producer who takes charge. Then you look for other incentives. Screen Flanders, VAF, you have plenty of opportunities in Belgium as well. And then you set up the production and you make very good arrangements with your Belgian producer to make sure that everything runs smooth, that everything is handled carefully. And then you can pretty easily move forward. One thing that is important that we see as a major driver for tax shelter, and again that sets it apart from a typical tax rebate, is the flexibility in cash flow. If you enter in a classic tax rebate, you get the money quite some while after you have made all the expenses. Belgian tax shelter is usually upfront, so usually you get the tax shelter money even before your Belgian spend is being made. Not always, not all of the money, but usually quite some money is made available. So we're working on a co-production at this moment. They have about 3 million euros of spend in Belgium. It counts for a bit more than 1 million euro of tax shelter. The money is made available beforehand. So cash flow wise for the international producer, that was one of the main reasons to come to Belgium for their, for example, post-production instead of going to Germany or wherever, because the cash flow is made available. They do not need to go to, in this case it was Kofi Loisir for insane interest rates. So the cash flow part is also an important driver. But again, you can find a balance and make sure that the setup is correct and complete for everyone. So that's pretty much it.
Good. Okay. Thank you. I think, meanwhile, the others could also come up on the stage for the final thoughts, and you can stay there. My question to you, Pieter, is that, I mean, it sounded easy, but is it actually complicated? I mean, what are the challenges that the producer can have?
For the international producer, it's the main challenge is to get in line with your Belgian production company. They need to be able to explain beforehand exactly what kind of money is made available. Yeah. Because 50% in theory sounds nice. In practice, it's 35 to 40. That's already something different. Yeah. Net and gross tax shelter, that often leads to miscommunication. So make good arrangements with your Belgian production company.